everyone. Welcome to another episode of A Feminine Moment. I am Cherry Lynn, and I'm here with Dixie Andelin Forsyth, author of Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman. Hi, Dixie.
Hi, Cherry.
So we're going to talk about girlishness, specifically about hinting. So what does that mean? When I think a lot of women might hear hinting and they'll think of different things. So,
well, the reason it's part of girlishness is asking for things. And a lot of times I think my own impression is because we tend to be more sensitive a lot of times than men. We don't want to ask for something and then just be told no. We'd rather get the hint. And if they get the hint, then we don't feel as like we're going to get in trouble. At least that's the way it is for me. I just thought of a really good example. It's exaggerated because it's from a child. But one of my nephews, when he was about 5, I guess, he was driving along in the car with his grandfather. And he said, they were driving along in the town, and he said, boy, that restaurant looks really good. Don't you think that restaurant looks good? He obviously was hinting that he wanted to go eat. Now, we talk a lot about in Fascinating Womanhood that kids tend to be just up front, but not all of them. This little boy was not with his parents. He was with a grandfather, so he didn't feel quite as comfortable. So we don't do usually anything that exaggerated, but we might say we're at the store, we might see some shoes. I love those shoes. Even my husband, who knows me really well, will probably not get the hint that I'd like them. And he might say, yeah, they're nice, and move on. And sometimes we get offended, like, no, how could he do that? Here's the thing, ladies. Men don't tend to get hints well. There's probably some out there that do, but the majority of them don't. And they appreciate it if we are upfront, not demanding. Like, say it's your anniversary, and you hint for what you'd like to do, or you hint that you want to go on a vacation. It would be better to say, I would love to go to such and such. Is there any way we could do it anytime this year? Instead of, I'd love to go there. It's still like, yeah, that would be nice, but it's all open. One of the reasons that men don't get hints as well as we do is because they're not as sensitive to relationships. It's not that they don't care, but we have more sensitivity to negativity into the relationship. So between us women, we tend to get our own hints fairly well. Like, I'm hungry. So you'd say, oh, do you want to go get something to eat? You'd think that was a very broad statement. I'm hungry. But a lot of times men, how do they know you don't say, I want to go home and eat? If you present it so that they can either say, yeah, let's, or we better not, the more specific you can be, the better. This last example I had was from when Bob and I were going to college. Well, he was in college. I was having babies. And we got this really big light fixture that hung from a hook. It was a little awkward and heavy for me to do, so I wanted him to help. So I asked him, could you hang this for me? He said, sure, I can't today. I'm kind of busy, so I'll do it later, which is, for me, code for uh-oh. And so I didn't, a few days passed, and there it was. And plus, I don't like messes. It was just sitting there on the floor. So I asked him, hey, are you gonna do this soon? He got a little bit, I could tell he was a little bit irritated. I think it's because he felt a lot of pressure from his classes. I think that was the semester he took 26 hours. It was in graduate school. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was real heavy. And so then I hinted more broadly, and I put it on the bed, in the middle of the bed. He picked it up and put it on the floor just before we went to bed. I realized that's not working. So then I remembered what my mother said, and I thought, I've already asked him to do it. So what I did is the second option, other than just being up front, is I thought, I'm going to hang it myself. I'm going to do it when I know he's coming home soon. So he came in, and I was kind of struggling with it. I put the hook on the ceiling, but I was really struggling with it. And my timing was specifically so he'd help me, because I didn't want to have to. It was really heavy and hard.
This is a scenario where it was heavy. And
it was heavy.
And it was a combination of, you really did need help.
I knew how to put the hook in the ceiling, obviously, but hanging it was really awkward, and I risked falling. It was a ladder, and I was kind of nervous to do it. I wanted his help. It's not that I couldn't have, but I was kind of nervous to do it, and I wanted his help because he's taller and stronger and everything. So when he came in and said, "Oh, let me help," and he did it in like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I just said, "Oh, thank you." I thought, well, that solved that problem.
Well, I think to your point in the story, you did ask him directly, and you're saying, I think your advice is if you are asking for things directly and you're not getting anywhere, this is another way to give him direct communication.
I didn't do it exactly right because I should have said, I need help with this light fixture. It's really heavy. Could you do it today? Or could you do it tomorrow? I just said, could you help me? And he said, yes. When, but he didn't say when. So it kind of got cut off because he had pressing things. The reality is once the hook was in, I mean, it was nothing to do it. But I think it felt daunting to him because he had so much to do, homework and stuff. He just didn't want to change focus. Mm-hmm. So that's another way you can do it. But the main point, ladies, is that men don't tend to get hints well, and we do a lot of hinting. Mm-hmm. If you just go through your day and think, how many times during a week do I actually hint for something? Bob and I, we go on dates every week. Where do you want to go? And I already have an idea where I wish we could go. He would prefer I say, could we do such and such? Yeah. I would really love to, unless there's something you would rather do. They like to go do this. And I'll just say, sure. So, even now I have to catch myself from hinting. It just comes so naturally to us to hint. Yeah. Because we don't want to be selfish. We don't want to seem like we got to have it our way and our own needs sometimes, because we put our children ahead of ourselves and all that. Our own needs sometimes we're so used to our needs kind of pushing them down that when it comes to asking for them, we feel a little vulnerable.
I like what you said earlier in the light fixture story. What I should have said to him is, will you do it tomorrow or this week? And I think that's a good point that you bring up, that over time you can kind of learn. Some women may say, can you do it? And the man will say, oh, I'll do it right now.
Ask him, when can you?
Yeah.
Or if I'd have been especially smart, if I could go back in time, I would have realized if I make it as easy as possible for him, if I'd already hung the hook and just said, could you lift this up there? It's really heavy for me. He would know that it was like a 30-second job. It was easy, and he knew it. And he thought, because when I was hanging, he says, "Oh, let me do that." I got frustrated.
Right.
He didn't even hardly notice. I'm the one who had to figure out, what do I do?
Well, he obviously had a lot on his mind in this scenario. Right. So I think that's important too, is that you're also got to understand him and where he's coming from, and not be just thinking about
the light fixture. Yeah, and that's the balance that we have. I want to support him and his real heavy schedule and trying to do what he needs to do, but I also need to balance out what I need from him and what I need to get done. And it's always a balance. So when we resort to hinting, I think that's why we do it as much as we do, because we don't want to put undue pressure. We don't want to seem demanding. And then we get frustrated when they don't get the hint. Because in a dating situation, we need to apply this to dating and not just married. In a dating situation, women probably tend to hint even more because they don't want to be presumptuous or anything. And sometimes they get angry when the guy doesn't get the hint. And so, but the same principles apply. It's better to just be upfront. That's why we call it girlishness or childlikeness. And to be upfront and say, I'd really like to do such as, is that something you'd like to do? It's not offensive. It's not selfish.
One of the things I hear so much about childlikeness is that it's just so misunderstood, and women kind of hear that word and they think, I'm not a child. And I think these examples are really strong because there are some aspects of a child that are really incredibly wonderful when it comes to communication. And I think what you brought up about the food is, the girl saying, I'm hungry and I want a hamburger. There's nothing about that you should be ashamed of looking at that as an example and as from a child. I refer to it more as girlishness, which I think is a much
for that very reason. Because people so often mix it up with childishness. And so girlishness doesn't sound necessarily like you're you're a baby.
It's the essence of a child, not literally a child. I'm so glad that you were able to use some of those examples too.
With no bitterness, no snark, and hinting. It'd be one thing if it worked, because we can often hint with each other, but it just doesn't work very well for men. And then sometimes we get upset that they didn't get the hint, and they think, what happened?
I think too with dating, I'm glad that you brought that up about dating, because a lot of women, I think, hint, like you said, even more when they're dating, probably because they're just putting their best foot forward and they just don't ever want to come across as aggressive or demanding. And I think pointing all these things out hopefully help the ladies that are wanting to know more about this to just think about it in the right approach and the right way, and it will come across the right way.
That's what I think too.
Well, this has been really helpful. Thank you so much for giving us all of your great advice. And thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to get Dixie's book, Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman, on Amazon, now an international bestseller on Amazon. I'll attach the link to purchase the book, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.